kick on the sidewalk, or the spark of a revolution. When Officer Donnelly attacked a pregnant black woman in broad daylight, he thought she was just another powerless voice. What he didn't know, her husband wasn't just any man. He was a veteran, a fighter, and a man who knew how to make the whole system tremble. And in the next few days, what started as one scream would grow into a movement that shook an entire city. This isn't just a story of brutality. It's about love, fury, and a justice that doesn't knock. It breaks down the door. Stick around. You won't believe how it ends. It was supposed to be an ordinary walk. Just a quiet southern afternoon where the sky stretched open like a prayer and the wind rustled gently through the pines. Celeste Monroe was almost 9 months pregnant, her steps slow but steady as she made her way down 4th and Walnut. One hand held a paper bag of fresh oranges, Gavin's favorite, while the other rested protectively over her belly. Inside, life stirred. Kicks and flutters like whispers of the future. She was going home. That's all. Celeste had just finished her shift at the library. She wasn't late, wasn't loitering, wasn't doing anything but walking home to surprise her husband with dinner and a smile. But peace is fragile in a city where uniforms too often see color before character. And that afternoon, peace shattered in the screech of tires. The police cruiser turned the corner like it was looking for trouble, and found her. Officer Rick Donnelly stepped out like a storm in human skin. Tall, pale, broad-shouldered, and coiled with the kind of authority that doesn't ask questions, just commands. Locals whispered his name in barber shops, muttered stories they didn't dare report. He was the kind of cop who made people cross the street before he even saw them. But Celeste didn't run. She didn't yell. She did what black women have been taught for generations. She stayed calm, stayed respectful, and stayed quiet. "I'm just walking home," she said softly when he barked at her to stop. Her voice barely rose above the breeze. Her eyes dropped to the sidewalk, not in shame, but in survival. But that wasn't enough for Donnelly. "You look like you're loitering," he snapped, hand hovering near his holster like a threat he didn't have to say out loud. "That's suspicious." Celeste's hands instinctively returned to her belly, cradling the only thing that truly mattered. "Sir, I'm not loitering," she replied. "I'm just trying to get home." But Donnelly didn't see a pregnant woman. He didn't see a librarian. He didn't see a wife, a mother-to-be, or a human being. He saw a target, an opportunity, a moment to flex control in a world that rarely told him no. Without warning, he shoved her. She stumbled. The oranges hit the pavement first, then her knees, then her hands. And just as she gasped, wrapping herself tighter around her unborn child, the kick came. Brutal. Final. Straight to the stomach. The scream that followed cracked the air like a lightning strike. It was the sound of pain and betrayal. Of a mother trying to shield her baby from a world that refused to protect her. And still no one moved. Phones were out. Mouths were open. But feet stayed still. Until someone pressed record. Until the footage went live. Until justice, long buried beneath silence, began to stir in the bones of a man who wasn't just a husband. He was a warrior. And his name was Gavin Monroe. What Officer Donnelly didn't know. He kicked the wrong woman. And awakened the wrong man. Gavin Monroe hadn't cried in years. Not through war zones. Not through the sleepless nights counseling other veterans haunted by battles they couldn't forget. Not even when his father passed, saying goodbye with a grip that trembled but never broke. But when he saw Celeste lying in that hospital bed, swollen and bruised, eyes struggling to stay open, he almost buckled. She didn't say much when he walked in. Just 3 words. "He kicked me." But that was enough. More than enough. Gavin gripped the side of the hospital bed like it could keep him grounded. He kissed her forehead gently, then sat in the stiff plastic chair beside her, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. The beeping monitors filled the silence between them, and the rise and fall of her belly was the only reassurance either of them had. The doctor came in. Blunt force trauma. Monitoring for placental abruption. Watching the heartbeat. Monitoring oxygen flow. Gavin heard the words, but didn't absorb them. His eyes never left the bruise creeping across Celeste's skin like spilled ink. His rage didn't scream, it simmered. And simmering rage is always more dangerous than loud fury. Later that night, Gavin stepped out for air. The hallway was cold, sterile, too clean for what he'd just witnessed. He took out his phone and hit send on a message that would light the first spark. "Need your help. Civil rights case. Not letting this slide." The reply came fast. Marcus Price. His old squad leader turned attorney. A man who fought systems the same way he used to fight wars, strategically and without mercy. I'm in. What happened? Gavin stared at the screen for a second, then typed slowly, deliberately. A cop kicked my pregnant wife in the stomach. And the whole damn world saw it. And they had. By then, the video had already gone viral. It wasn't just Wilmington watching anymore. It was Atlanta, New York, Oakland. A woman had filmed everything, screaming in the background, "She's pregnant," as Donnelly walked away like it meant nothing. But now it meant everything. People had gathered outside the hospital. First a handful, then dozens. Candles flickered on the steps like quiet prayers. Signs appeared overnight. Justice for Celeste. Protect black mothers. She was just walking home. Gavin stood at the third-floor window, watching the vigil grow. The rage in his chest didn't flare. It focused. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about truth. About making sure Celeste's story didn't end on a sidewalk. He returned to her room. She was awake, whispering to their baby, her hand tracing slow circles across her stomach. "He doesn't get to walk away," Gavin said softly. Celeste turned to him. "Promise me you won't do anything reckless." "I won't," Gavin lied. Because something had shifted. Not just in the city, but in him. And if Officer Donnelly thought this was just another incident to be swept away, he was about to learn something brutal. Gavin Monroe didn't wait for justice. He made it happen. By morning, Gavin had already made 6 phone calls. Civil rights advocates, journalists, veterans networks, and one to a friend at the local news station, who owed him a favor from years back. It wasn't revenge he was after, it was exposure. And if no one in uniform was going to hold Donnelly accountable, then Gavin would hold the mirror up himself. Outside the hospital, the vigil had doubled. Elderly church mothers stood beside teenage activists. A little girl handed Celeste a sunflower through the hospital lobby doors. One sign read, "We don't have to bleed to be believed." Another, "Say her name, Celeste Monroe." Inside, Celeste was gaining strength, but the bruises still bloomed like dark flowers. Her voice was stronger now. So was her will. She watched Gavin move with a different kind of intensity. Not frantic, but focused. Measured. Like a man who'd once trained for battle and knew he was entering another one. By noon, Gavin had organized a press conference. He didn't wait for a polished statement or media coach. He stood at the top of the hospital steps with his hands shaking slightly and Celeste's photo in his pocket. The cameras rolled. The microphones leaned in. "My name is Gavin Monroe," he said, steady and slow. "And the woman you saw on the sidewalk? That's my wife. That's the mother of my child." He paused. "She was kicked in the stomach by a police officer while carrying our son. And we're not asking for revenge. We're demanding accountability." His voice was gravel and conviction. The crowd didn't cheer. They nodded. They wept. They listened. That night, the story aired on every local channel. The footage again. Celeste's name. Gavin's voice. And then the calls started coming. CNN, MSNBC, independent journalists, podcasters, churches, advocacy groups. Everyone wanted to hear from the man who refused to let the moment pass quietly. But not everyone was offering support. By the next morning, Gavin's counseling center was mysteriously cited for zoning violations. Anonymous messages filled his inbox, some angry, some threatening. One simply read, "Stop, or we stop you." He showed it to Celeste. Her jaw tightened. "You scared?" "No," Gavin said. "I've been to war. This is just another battlefield." She nodded. "Then fight smart." He did. Alongside Marcus Price, now fully committed to the case, Gavin began collecting evidence. They compiled complaints about Officer Donnelly that had been dismissed or ignored, 3 women. 1 man. All black. All silenced. And now they had faces. Names. Stories. Then came the breakthrough. A whistleblower, a junior officer, reached out anonymously. He sent a memo. Internal warnings about Donnelly's aggressive behavior that had been swept aside. Gavin read it twice. Then a third time. They had proof. "This isn't just a rogue cop," Marcus said over the phone. "This is a protected pattern. And we're going to break it," Gavin replied. As the sun set over Wilmington that day, the Monroe house didn't feel like a home under siege. It felt like headquarters. And Gavin Monroe, he wasn't a grieving husband anymore. He was a man with a mission, and the storm he was building would leave no badge untouched. By the 3rd day, the silence from City Hall became deafening. Not a single public statement. No apology. No suspension. The only noise came from behind the scenes, political spin doctors scrambling to contain a blaze they couldn't extinguish. But Gavin wasn't waiting for them to catch up. He was already 10 steps ahead. Rosa Fields arrived in Wilmington that morning. A fierce civil rights attorney with a reputation for cracking open police departments like walnuts. Her heels clicked down the hospital hallway like a metronome of momentum. She didn't come with a press packet, she came with fire. "I read the memo," she told Gavin, shaking his hand firmly. "This isn't just about Donnelly. This is a system failure. And systems don't fix themselves." Celeste was resting. Her color had returned. But her eyes still dimmed when the subject turned to Donnelly. Gavin leaned in, kissed her forehead. "We're going to fix this," he whispered. "Not just for us. For everyone." That afternoon, Rosa, Marcus, and Gavin held a joint press conference outside the courthouse. Rosa didn't waste time. "We're filing a federal civil rights lawsuit," she said clearly, "against Officer Rick Donnelly and the Wilmington Police Department for excessive force, civil rights violations, and criminal negligence." The crowd gasped. Reporters scrambled. But Rosa wasn't done. "We're also demanding an independent investigation into the department's handling of prior complaints and a full audit of use of force incidents involving minority residents." Gavin stepped up to the mic next. His voice was low, but there was steel behind every word. "You want to know why I'm here? Because I'm tired. Tired of hashtags. Tired of vigils. Tired of watching people like my wife get hurt and then erased. This time, we don't just want justice. We want change." That night, the local news called it a legal earthquake. The footage of Celeste being kicked played on a loop, now accompanied by commentary from lawyers, activists, and even former cops who called the act unforgivable. But not everyone applauded. The police union issued a statement defending Donnelly, labeling Gavin's movement a dangerous overreach. A few council members called for caution and restraint. Online trolls flooded Gavin's social media with doubt, hate, and twisted narratives. Still, the momentum didn't stop. Because every time someone tried to deflect, another person came forward. An elderly woman with a story from 1987. A young father who'd been pulled over for a broken taillight and left with a concussion. The pattern was emerging, and Gavin was amplifying every voice. Marcus called him late that night. "They're rattled," he said. "We've got them on their heels. Keep pushing." And Gavin did. He reached out to churches, community organizers, veterans groups. He gave interviews not for attention, but for awareness. Every sentence he spoke wasn't just a demand. It was a declaration. "They tried to make us the exception," he said during a live stream. "But we're becoming the rule." In a city used to brushing problems under the rug, Gavin Monroe was lifting the whole floor. And the foundation was starting to crack. The courtroom wasn't just packed, it was electrified. The same building where Celeste's case was filed now pulsed with anticipation. Outside, people held signs with her name. Inside, they held their breath. The air was so thick with tension, it felt like one sharp word could snap it in half. Gavin sat beside Celeste, their fingers intertwined like a pact. Across the aisle, Officer Rick Donnelly sat stiff in a grey suit, but his badge, once polished and feared, was gone. Stripped. Suspended. Now, he was just another man facing consequences. Rosa stood at the front, poised, powerful. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is not about confusion. It is not about misunderstanding. It is about power, abused. It is about a woman who was kicked, not because she posed a threat, but because she was visible." The prosecution played the footage again. The moment froze the room. Some turned away. Some cried. Some clenched fists in silence. And when Celeste took the stand, calm, soft-spoken, unshaken, it was no longer just evidence. It was testimony. She told them about the pain, the fear, the child inside her that she thought she lost. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She just told the truth. "I was walking home," she said, holding a bag of oranges. "I didn't think that would be the last thing I'd do without pain." The defense tried to argue procedure, tried to cast shadows where there was sunlight. They said Donnelly felt threatened, that he acted in the moment. But no one bought it. The jury had seen the video. They had heard Celeste. They had heard the city scream for weeks. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Celeste exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. Gavin held her as the courtroom erupted not in cheers, but in tears. Outside, the news spread like lightning. National anchors picked up the story. "Justice delivered in Wilmington," read the headline on CNN. But Gavin knew it was bigger than that. Justice wasn't just a word anymore. It was a name. Their son, born 2 weeks after the trial, with eyes like Celeste's and a quiet strength already rooted in him. They named him Justice Monroe, not because of what they won, but because of what they refused to surrender. The city changed after that. Slowly, but undeniably. The Monroe Initiative for Police Accountability received funding, volunteers, and attention. Laws were drafted. Policies were reviewed. Officers were retrained. The silence was broken. And as Celeste stood at the opening of a new maternal health clinic, one named after her, she smiled at the little boy wobbling beside her. "You changed everything," she whispered, brushing his curls. Behind her, Gavin spoke to a crowd of supporters, students, families. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with purpose. "This isn't the end," he said, his voice steady. "It's the beginning. Because we're not just telling stories anymore. We're writing new ones. And in ours, justice always has a name."